Welcome to this week's episode of Pondering Play and Therapy with me, Philippa. And this week, my guest is Penny from NVR Northampton, which is Nonviolent Resistance. So, welcome, Penny. Thanks for joining our podcast.
Thank you.
So, NVR is Nonviolent Resistance. So, what does that mean for our listeners that are listening? What does that really mean?
Yeah, it's that elevator pitch that we've been looking for ages, the how to encapsulate what is a 10-week training to foundation level and all. How do you summarise that? I was at Hayamoma's book launch online yesterday. Hayamoma is the family therapist in Israel who came up with nonviolent resistance as a parenting approach in around the early 2000s. So he's written about 15 books since, and the latest one, the NVR case book, I think it's called, he launched yesterday. So while he was there, and it wasn't tons of people, we were able to ask questions. So I said, oh no, it was my colleague Donna who asked this one for an elevator pitch for NVR, because we get asked this a lot. Dan Dolberger, also an NVR practitioner, therapist, was doing the interview because Chaim's very hard of hearing. And Dan had to describe to Chaim what an elevator pitch was. And it's certainly not what I'm doing right now. But he'd never heard of it. So he explained you get the distance from like the ground floor to wherever you're going to explain to this very busy person what your pitch is anyway. Right. So Chaim had to think about it. Oh, I'd never heard of that. And his elevator pitch was 7.5 minutes.
Okay. Well, you can give it a go if you want to.
Oh, right. No. Well, Dan watched, and you could see him. It was getting to the point where we started almost giggling because it got longer and longer and longer. And it's a really tall building that Chaim obviously had in mind. But Dan summarised afterwards and said his elevator pitch, and it's really short, was NVR helps caregivers stand against harm caringly and together.
Okay.
So we also put the 7 minutes of Chaim's through AI. Okay. And 7.5 minutes condensed into 2 sentences. NVR helps parents who feel they've lost control, connection, or hope with their child to reclaim their presence, not through force, but with calm, strength, support, and persistent care. It replaces isolation with community, fear with purpose, and creates a path for rebuilding trust, respect, and belonging in the family. Okay. You've done the foundation level training, Philippa. Do you think that encapsulates much of...
I think it's hard, isn't it, to kind of sum up what it is, but I'm guessing it's aimed at people who are caring, looking after the main adults in a child or young person's life. And what they're experiencing is children who are dysregulated, and that dysregulation is coming in more of maybe aggressive behaviours. And that doesn't necessarily have to be towards a parent. It may be towards items in the house. It may be towards their own things. It may be towards themselves.
Yeah.
And this is the way I think about it, is that then those parents, those caregivers can support that child in those big feelings with those dysregulation without themselves joining in the conflict and escalating the conflict.
Yeah.
And it's a way of kind of knowing what our parental presence can provide. And the biggest thing about that is the safety that that child needs, whether that's physical safety, because they're going to hurt themselves or somebody else. How do we provide that physical safety? Emotional safety and relational safety, because I guess for me, one of the big things that I like about NVR is it prioritizes the child-parent relationship and how that it remains intact.
Yeah.
And that some of these strategies, some of the interventions, that's what they're there do is prioritize that relationship as a way
Mm.
of supporting the child.
Yeah.
Would that
And
be?
rebuild. Yeah, see, we're getting there now, aren't we?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's a really tall building and that elevator's going a long way.
absolutely.
It can be rebuilding a relationship that's gone wrong. It can be establishing a relationship that never was. We do lots of work with foster carers and adopted parents. So establishing a relationship that never was, often, as you say, in the context of developmental and relational trauma. But it was originally developed exactly for child to parent violence and then kind of expanded to any caregiver. So teachers, residential care home staff, and then adapted to all sorts of parenting and child raising dilemmas. So beyond challenging behaviours, violent, self-destructive behaviours, now into eating disorders, anxiety-based difficulties, entitled dependents, so adults who stay in the home and, demand that their, their 70-year-old parents are still bringing their dinner to those kind of problems, and suicide and self-harm. There's been a lot of work in NVR around that. What myself and my colleague Donna are working on at the moment is adapting the approach for situations where parental alienation is suspected, where people either feel that their ex is turning the children against them, or that parent is being accused of turning their children against the other parent. So non-violence helps because it brings in community. It's a very collective community problem solving way of doing things. It raises people's presence in their circles, gives them courage, hope, and a feeling of being supported, which then, it improves how the young person regards that parent as a person of worth with a credible voice. So,
Yeah.
it's very powerful.
So when you talk about non-violence, are you talking about non-violence of the adult or the person kind of in that position of caring? Or are you talking about no violence from the child or the teen or the adult that's being cared for?
I think
What is the non-violence bit?
it's a controversial term, and increasingly I'm hearing people changing it, talking about a new authority. So a way of maintaining like I say, a credible authority, but in a new way, not the old version of kind of coercive control and force. Connecting authority is another one. But for me, there's something about holding on to the nonviolent resistance and building people's awareness of the meaning rather than, kind of adjusting it to the audience too much. But for me, it's a very nonviolent in a very broad sense.
So we're
It's not.
talking about the adult, are we? So we're talking
We're
about the
talking
adult.
about mainly the adults, the people of influence in the child's life, and that can be peers. If we're looking at some of the work done in schools, how peer groups are kind of recruited into the nonviolent resistance of someone else's bullying. So, it can be children and young people themselves. We got NVR in kind of reverse, where children are supported to resist the violence or the destructive behaviours of their parents who get dysregulated. So, the non-violence is a refusal to join a pattern of coercive control. So the violence in the broadest sense is trying to make somebody do what you want them to do, otherwise they will suffer pain in some way, physical, emotional, social. Humiliation can be seen as an act of violence, very broad. But it's doing things as Dan Dolberger described it, caringly together.
So it's that, I suppose I'm just thinking if parents are listening to this, it's trying to really help them understand what we're talking about. And that is that, so some of it's not just about whether you smack your child, which hopefully people aren't doing now. So it's not, the violence can be the get to your room, you horrible child, why have you, that kind of thing that creates emotional harm to someone, doesn't it? It's that emotional harm or that emotional rejection that can come sometimes.
Damage to the relationship.
But sometimes it's really understandable, Penny, isn't it? When you are at the end of your blinking tether and you've had a whole weekend, or, we've got the school summer holidays coming up, and you really don't feel that you've got any other kind of strategies left to manage the behavior that's going on. Sometimes you do say things that you don't mean, don't you? And you maybe do put in consequences or punishments, as as we would call them, that you wouldn't maybe necessarily want to do, but you feel a bit helpless in that, well, what else do I do? How else do I manage this? So we revert back to maybe some of these old, very draconian or very behavioural responses. And I guess NVR is a way of trying to help people out of those very traditional types of behaviour and think about it in a different way. Would that be right?
Definitely. I mean, those, like you say, they're very kind of old authority responses. The punishment, the becoming the frightening parent in order to get control. And as you say, parents can't be expected to be perfect Buddha type characters who never show emotion. And of course, Winnicott would say that that would be failing the child anyway. We can't raise our children to think that the world is full of people who are never going to ruffle their feathers at all. So, we're not looking for perfection, but awareness of doing those relational repairs. If you do find yourself dysregulated and parenting in a way that does not really honour how you want to, and they're often a kind of stress response, and the idea that you've got to fix it now, you've got to make this child stop doing this thing or start doing this thing, otherwise you're not a good enough parent. There's a feeling of kind of humiliation and isolation. If I'm a good enough parent, then I should be able to control this child on my own. And for me, that was never the way, the human species raised their children. As far as I know, we did it collectively. We did it in small tribes, and children were bounced on many knees. But now we kind of live in boxes where we cut off, and there's what Hyam calls the privacy reflex, where we keep it all behind closed doors and we don't tell anyone that there's any problems going on. And it's kind of breaking down those confinements and bringing in older wisdoms, ways of parenting, so that you're supported. And when you feel yourself getting to that burnout phase, you're aware of it, and there are people who will come in and assist you. But it's training parents to be able to recognise where that support is already existing, that they may not be utilising because of the privacy reflex or the feeling that everybody is busy and they've got their own problems and I should be able to manage this, and kind of coaching them to plug into resources. It becomes mutual. It becomes it's community changing. The ripples improve things for everybody, really.
I think sometimes parents can think that, well, actually, they don't misbehave at scouts or at guides.
Yeah.
So I don't want them to know about this part of my child. I want to protect that environment for them. So I'm not going to talk to them about it because actually, we don't want those to know. But maybe schools see it, so it's okay to talk about it at school. Would that be what NVR would say? Is that the places where these behaviours don't happen, we don't share it, and we just share it with the people that already know?
No, it's important to kind of overcome that shame, that privacy reflex, that idea that your child will be judged or criminalised, or and that's a danger. But we coach parents how to ask for help in a way that is helpful to them, and to think about which people in these areas, these school clubs, after school clubs, their family, their friends, the church, whatever communities they're plugged into, who in those circles are what we would call a safe supporter, somebody who's not going to be critical and prescriptive and overbearing and judgmental and punishing. And so we work with the parent to find a starting point. Who do you feel? Who gives you a felt sense of being accepted and supported and okay? And those are the kind of people that we want to bring closer and nurture those relationships and bring in those supports. But a child who experiences carving up the world into adults who get this version of me and adults who get this version of me, is missing out on a feeling of being contained and held consistently everywhere. And NVR kind of creates ways of communicating to the child that we are all singing off the same hymn sheet here, and that is, we care about you, you matter to us, you are one of us, and this isn't how we behave.
No,
We're
and
here to help.
I guess also if you are having to hold it in some places, whether that's school or with grandparents or in a club, I suppose I think about it a little bit like having a bottle of pop with a lid on, and it's just slowly being shaken in these environments. And eventually the lid does come off, doesn't it? And that may be at home, it may be at school, it may be somewhere, but eventually that pop is going to explode. So I guess what you're saying is if all the supporters can know all of the child, then actually the child doesn't have to kind of keep the lid on in all places, that actually the strategies can support the child in every area, so that they don't have to be fizzy and holding it in and then exploding. So they're getting these big behaviors, which I guess in itself is destructive in many ways to that self-esteem in some places, because they are then having to explode to kind of let these big feelings out. But then this explosion can be seen as a misbehavior or negative behavior, and that then goes back around that cycle.
Yeah, definitely. You can kind of depressurize a bit with more people.
Yeah.
We know what's going on, we're concerned, we're here to help. That's not okay, that has to change. What can we do?
Yeah. So those NVR call that kind of recruiting supporters, but there are lots of stages, lots of different kind of strategies, I guess, that NVR uses. So can you talk us through some more of those? And where do you start with a family? What do you start thinking about with a family?
It depends on the family. You hear their story, you hear what's going on in their household, and we have something called the baskets, or other people call it boxes, or there's traffic lighting. But looking at all the things that they're frightened about, upset about, where the risk is, and deciding which ones we're going to prioritise. So in the smallest basket go never more than 2 behaviours, and they're usually the ones that are most risky and dangerous. So they're the violence, they're the self-destructive behaviours. In the medium basket, we put things that really need to change, but we can manage for now. We'll get to them later. So perhaps children not going to school when that hasn't been agreed, perhaps swearing, door slamming, the things that bother a parent and need to change. And then in the big basket, all the things that we're just going to let go of, that we're just not going to, ruin our days worrying about. So as many of those as possible. They tend to be the things that are an issue because of this kind of faceless jury that parents have, that if my child leaves a wet towel on the floor, it looks like I've raised a slob. So therefore I'm going to battle for to get this child to pick the towel up. When we could say, look, your child's 10, probably not thinking that, it isn't, not doing it on purpose. Can we just forget about it? Because in 7 years' time, they may have left home and you'll miss those wet towels. So let's just think about your blood pressure. Everybody's is different. So we're working with the parents' own priorities and what matters to them. But being careful what we focus on, because that's where the time and energy goes. And we also want to leave enough time and energy available for, as you said earlier, the relationship stuff, the connecting stuff. A lot of parents who come to us have got to the point where there are no good moments, there are no positive interactions. It's always got to be a battle to get your child to be this person who does these things or stops doing these things. And when they are, then they can have the nice things. Then you'll be nice to them and smile at them. And no, what we do is we have both hands. We have the kind of disciplining in terms of, you know, the oldest sense of the word, teaching, raising good citizens. And on the other hand, we want to love our children. We want to enjoy our children. We want to nurture relationship with them and teach them those skills. Does that make sense?
I'm going to come, because also when I did the training with you, you talked about the rainbow basket. So I want to come back to that. So let's forget about the rainbow basket, because I think that's very important. And I really loved that. So the baskets, I guess, are something that most people probably know about NVR, don't they? That's quite, if you Google NVR, that comes up quite quickly on Google and those sorts of things. So it seems quite simple, I think, where you think, oh, just put 2 in the red, no more than 5 in the amber, and everything else goes in the green. But I'm guessing in practice, that's pretty hard, really, just only to accept and focus on 2 behaviours in the beginning. I think sometimes it might give parents permission to let the other stuff go, which in itself can be quite freeing, can't it? But if you're asking a parent to not address the effing and jeffing that's going on, but just address the aggression,
The punching.
that can be really hard, because sometimes parents would much prefer to take the punching and deal with the effing and jeffing, because the effing and jeffing could go outside and could be viewed as a different, but actually the punching and the violence is the risk. So that's what and I guess that's really quite a tricky thing for parents to do, is to let something extreme go.
Yeah. And that's, you know, that's one of the things that Chaim really emphasizes about NVR, is that it grows that courage. It takes courage to appear in public with a child who uses bad language and not crumble in shame. But we talk about psychological presence, that you're knowing that you're choosing something that, you know, has a good evidence base. It will work most of the time. And persistence. You know, the NVR is unite, resist, persist, repair. So the unite is the gathering of people and the regathering and the adding to and the nurturing that. The resist are the strategies that we'll come on to. And persist. And that does take the support and the encouragement from people around you to be able to withstand the faced and the faceless juries that are going to say, you know, you're a bad parent, your child swears. Yeah. And And what was the last one? Repair, relational repair. Yeah. Putting the effort into that.
So you would really advocate that actually NVR is about, we just are going to focus on these two behaviours at the most, because actually that's what you can manage. And also, I guess it reduces the conflict, because if you're not nagging about picking the towels up and put your shoes on the thing, then you've got more time, I guess, for the other bit that I just wanted you to add before we go into strategies, the rainbow basket. So I really liked that when I did the training with you, that you'd added this rainbow basket. So tell us what that is.
So the rainbow basket, bit like the elevator pitch, we're looking for a different word for it. I'm not keen on rainbow basket. It's a bit, but basically positives, the wins, the good things, the appreciations about your child. Quite often when parents first come to us, they have what Dan Hughes called blocked care. And the child feels blocked trust because there's been so much damage to the relationship, and the parent often feels blocked care. It's like compassion fatigue. The relationship has become so punishing and mutually damaging that they can't connect to those feelings. So if you prioritise the rainbow basket, then you're consciously looking for things, signs of good qualities in your child, signs of lovely interactions, and really pulling them out. And we get parents to write them in the back of their books their journals, and things like when you're struggling with a violent 8-year-old all day, you go in at night and you watch them asleep and they look like little angels, and you really kind of amplify the stuff that brings out that caring, which helps the caring dialogue start to flow, as Peter Jacob calls it. And and you nurture that relationship by reducing the battling. It gives you much more wriggle room for good things to flow, healthy interactions. And you may find that a lot of the stuff in the medium basket falls away because you can deal with it in playful ways. Maybe you have that connection with your child, and there may be gentler ways of encouraging them to pick up the towel without battling.
And I guess it's also about noticing those, aren't they? Because often it feels like they never do it or that they always do it. But the reality is it's not never and always, because sometimes they're at school and sometimes they're asleep and sometimes they are watching TV or sometimes they're engaged with granny or the neighbour next door. So it's not always and it's not never. And I guess for most families, there are moments where they do pick the towel up or they do shove their shoes, even if it doesn't go completely right, into the cupboard, or they do eat all their dinner that you've cooked them rather than chucking it away. And I suppose that for me, that extra basket, whatever you call it, is about noticing those moments. They may be few and far between,
but they're very
they're
likely
there, aren't they? Yes.
I mean, it's as humans, it's cognitive economy, isn't it? You see what you expect to see. And if you can consciously expect to see evidence of other things, then you will be able to pick them out and other people will be able to notice them. And you can comment. We don't advocate the kind of good boy pat on the head, rewarding acknowledgement of these things, but an appreciation is more relational. I don't want to embarrass you, but I just wanted to say, I haven't had to pick a towel up off the floor for a whole week and it's been lovely.
Yeah, that's great. So once you've got these behaviours, once you've got your ones in the basket, what happens next? What are you going to be thinking about then with NVR?
One of the principles of NVR is transparency. It's really important that you're transparent. It's fair. So you give the child fair warning that you're no longer going to tolerate whatever risky, dangerous, damaging behaviour it is. You need to tell them. We have an announcement and there's a formula for that helps parents and carers to, in a very kind, supportive way, starting with the appreciative talk from all the things they've noticed. We call it a bit of a sandwich. Can I say the S word with 4 letters? Starting with the positive, the more difficult stuff in the middle, and ending on a positive. It's a lot like that. But saying, these are what we appreciate about you. This is, and they love hearing that bit. These are our concerns. These are the things that are happening that make us worried for you, for our relationship, for the future. And we can't just let it carry on. We care too much. It's too important. And then a fair warning that things are going to be changing, that there will be people that we're going to be telling about this who will help us and support us resist these behaviours. You're not resisting the child. You love the child, you're resisting the behaviours, and then ending with your reasons why, your positive vision of the future. When things are better and we're all feeling happier, we'll be able to go on that holiday like we did 3 years ago before all this started, that kind of thing.
And you wouldn't. Sorry, I was going to say it's not done in a shaming way. Is that you are this? It's more about, we know that you have really big feelings, and we know it's really hard for you to manage those sometimes, and we want to help you with this, and this is how we're going to help you with this, rather than you are bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Not non-shaming. It's getting the balance right. We need the child to not feel okay about the behaviour if possible, but not in a way that destroys their self-esteem. So it's separating the child and the personhood of the child from the behaviours that they're exhibiting. And you may well, in different circumstances, various circumstances, if there are things that you feel you've done that have contributed, you can use that announcement to say, we have responded in this way and we're sorry. I've shouted. I've taken away things for weeks on end and made you unhappy. I'm not going to do that anymore. I don't want our household to be like that. And you can express some understanding. A lot of children who have had difficult pasts know that they've had difficult pasts and know that they're somehow connected. A lot of children, if they're lucky, have had some of that life story work done. So you can acknowledge there are good reasons why you respond like this. We get it. And we're going to help you not. Yeah, absolutely. It's no good shaming violence.
Yeah. What ages would you do this with? Where would you start? Because I'm guessing 2 and 3-year-olds, you wouldn't be doing it there, because one is that we don't even know where the behaviour is going to go for them.
No.
What age
No.
would you start, do you think?
As young as you feel able to. There are ways of adapting that framework for any age. For a toddler, you could do it with pictures.
Okay, yeah.
For a 36-year-old who won't leave their bedroom, you might write quite a long email, perhaps, or read out quite a long speech. But you adapt it. And it's not, all of this, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's not a one-time deal. You can do another one, you can redo it, you can come back and try again. It's as the statement, what you're expressing your position and giving them fair warning. So yeah, any age, but adjust it accordingly. We've seen people do very creative PowerPoint presentations and videos and songs. I saw somebody who got a ukulele and done the announcement in the form of a song for their little one. So yeah, many ways. It's adaptable.
So you're letting the child know that this is the behaviour that's not okay within your family, and you understand why that behaviour is there, and that you're going to seek support to support them, so that as a family you can be more connected, have more joy in that. And so once you've done that announcement, what happens then? Where do you go with that? Because I'm guessing it might shock them. What would they say? No, we're not doing this. Do you think there'd be a bit of resistance to that?
Sometimes there's all sorts of responses. We've had it torn up and shoved back under the door. We've silence it, but it doesn't matter. It's not about the response from the child, it's the doing. NVR is about the adults doing. And again, that's where the courage comes from, because for a lot of these parents, the thought of daring to say no, to resist, to not comply, to stop accommodating all this feels way off. So the act of actually doing it changes things. It changes the child's view of the adult and the adult's view of themselves. I'm now somebody who can speak my truth, my boundary, and it kind of starts to make a difference.
And you support families with this? Would you, if they needed you to be, would you be in the home with them while they do it? Would you help them to write it?
All of that. There's quite a lot of preparation that goes into an announcement, and the act of writing, creating the announcement is a process in itself that is change making. Doing that detail, people find it very emotional, especially the first bit, the appreciations, reconnecting with those feelings that they've been yearning to feel. That kind of starts. The clarity. It's like Rosa Parks said about the power of a made-up mind. When you go through it in that detail and you speak, you label what's happening, you call it violence. You say when you hit, kick, smack, spit at mum or dad or your sister or whatever it is, you're naming it. You're not beating around the bush and euphemisms and no, you're on the nose. This is the problem. This is how I feel about you. This is the problem. And this is why I want it to stop. This is what I'm going to... Again, we have many, many parents who never actually deliver the announcement because something in their demeanour changes through the process of doing it. Very subtle. Parents who carry them around, the announcement in their pocket for years. never have to actually deliver it. Something changes. Having the conversations with their family and friends, perhaps about writing the announcement. Now you've started to speak into your circle about what's going on. The change process is subtle and not always predictable and unique to each family. And yeah, we have attended announcement deliveries, or been there on the phone or by video, or we've done role plays. Sometimes parents would like to rehearse it before they do it, so they feel what it's going to be like and think about who they need sat next to them, slightly behind, maybe in the doorway, but not blocking the doorway, maybe downstairs, noisily making tea and cakes for after, just so that the child can hear. Thinking of how do you need people to be to support you in doing this? Yeah.
That sounds like a very powerful process, really, because you're connecting with something in you that's quite vulnerable while you're doing it. And I guess there's a validation to that process as a parent that in itself can be very powerful, that actually, this is hard. This is, and I'm doing a really great job because I've been doing this for the last 2.5 years on my own. And no wonder I need help. No wonder, that in itself, I guess, is a very powerful, process to go through.
And you're seeing people who have shown up for you and they're reflecting back to you that you matter. So maybe I do matter. Maybe I don't deserve to be treated this way. So yeah, again, the supporters make a huge difference. A lot of people will have a meeting of supporters before they do the announcement if they really want to gather and say, I'm going to do this. This is what's going on in my household. I'm writing this, or I've written this. I want you to hear it. And then the announcement can become a kind of unifying document so everybody knows.
Okay, so what happens next then? Where do you go next? So we've got this announcement. We've narrowed the behaviours down, that we're only going to look at these one or two. So what happens now? What are parents going to do? Or does the child just change?
That's what I was going to say. At each stage, that can happen. Sometimes before anything's been said, like I say, the parent's demeanour can change, and sometimes everything changes. Quite often, the act of making the announcement and those appreciations, it should be quite a connecting activity. So your relationship has changed. Yeah, there are practitioners who don't go much further than that because they haven't needed to. The thing about NVR, you do as much as you need to. And if you need to do a bit more, you do a bit more. Or you might need to do a bit more later.
So you go as far as you need to. So if you need to stop, if the announcement changes it. I guess one of the things I was going to ask about that is about the reconnecting. So you said you might have somebody downstairs making tea and cakes, and I suppose that's that reconnecting thing. And I wonder if playfulness and play could come into that part. It's going to be emotionally charged for a period of time, but I wonder if play and playfulness can be part of that reconnecting or that bringing together at the end of the announcement.
Definitely. And I would say scenario I've given you was a very kind of official, proper how you do an announcement and how you deliver an announcement. It's not like that for every family. An announcement can have that formula worked into a conversation over breakfast or a card game, or you can mix the two. It doesn't have to be a negative experience for a child necessarily.
Yeah. So you can do it playfully. I guess playing the ukulele is quite a playful thing. Julie, who I do this podcast with, that's how she would do it because she's well into music and singing. She'd probably play the ukulele and sing it. Really quite, So, okay. One of the things that I remember from our course is the whirlwind about thinking about where do you interrupt before before there's an escalation. And again, I really liked that. And actually, The sheet that you gave me is quite playful. I
Mm.
think it looks a bit like a sea snail with
Yeah,
it's really quite pretty. And I
yes.
know that that's not what it's designed to be, but it is quite playful. So tell us a little bit about thinking about how do you interrupt that whirlwind.
So the escalation whirlpool is, like you say,
Mm.
like a stale shell in like bricks sections, if you like. So you take an interaction that has turned into an escalation, and you kind of deconstruct it. So where did it start? What was the first thing you did or said? How was that responded to? How did you respond to that? Then what happened? And in a calm place with that distance, you can see the spaces between where you might have done differently. And yeah, I would say that humour and play used carefully could come into that. One de-escalation technique is always going to be distraction. We'll leave that until things are calm, and we'll come back to that. And why don't we go and do this? Yeah,
Yeah.
looking for those spaces where you can take it off the course it's going.
And I suppose that's breaking it down quite into very small moments, isn't it? So
Mm.
it's rather than thinking, oh yeah, this happened. They just come in from school and they slammed up the
Mm.
stairs. It's thinking about going back. Okay, so how do you know how did you know what they were feeling at that moment? How did you? So you can build in that parental attunement at those moments, can't you?
Mm.
So you can help that. Because again, the other thing that I quite like about NVR is that parental presence. It's about
Mm.
how can you be present for your child,
Mm.
even if they don't want you to be present. And some of that is being able to see where they are. They don't know where they are. So when they
Yeah.
walk in the door, escalation is thinking about, okay, how do you know what they're feeling when they walk through the door?
Mm.
And when you know what they're feeling, can you do something different at that moment?
Mm.
Depending on and so it's breaking it down into the minutiae really, rather than
Mm.
taking a chunk of time.
Mm.
Is that right?
Yeah, and you can't do that unless you're in what Paul Gilbert would call a compassionate mindset,
Mm-hmm.
rather than a kind of self-protective, defensive. So before you act into those moments of the door slam when they come in from school, checking in with yourself. How am I? Is my heart racing? Am I feeling really angry? Because it's going to come out in ways that are not anywhere near your ideal of parenting. So again, we're back to it's about what you do. It's about your self-regulation. It's about you holding yourself and the quality of your presence as close to your ideal as possible. And then you can take action and respond in a way that you've decided, not as a knee-jerk reflex.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because a lot of NVR is around knowing what you can control rather than trying to control something that you can't. And I
Not a
guess,
lot that you can control, is there? Ultimately, you can't control what anybody does. You can't
mm,
make your child do anything. A lot of what your children do that you like is based on their goodwill and their logic, because maybe hopefully they want things to be nice and they care about you, but you're not making them.
it's about the
Um,
relationship, though. That's what I often think is that
it's the
actually,
relationship. Yeah.
when you're 15, you really don't have to come home if you don't want to. If you're out and you decide not to come home, you
Yeah.
don't have to come home. But what makes you come home is the relationship you have with your parent or your caregiver, and the fact that
Yeah.
you don't want them to be worried about you because you know that they'll worry about you,
That's
or
it.
you don't want them to be
Lie awake.
disappointed in you
Yeah.
because you value their view of you. But
Mm.
that is about holding that relationship really key. And if
Mm.
you've got all this conflict going on, then I'm guessing that leads to them, although probably deep down they care, the outer bit is their, that what you talked about before, that preconception of what people are going to think. So they think,
Mm.
well, they don't care anyway, they're just going to shout at me.
Mm.
So it's like, then there's no point me going home on time, or there's no point me behaving because they feel like this,
Mm-hmm.
rather than I know they care about me.
Yeah.
Because care can be shown in different ways, can't it? It can be
Mm.
shown through anger, because we're scared. We're scared when our kids don't come home on time.
Mm.
And we can show it in anger, or I guess for NVR, it would say check in with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing you've got control over. You haven't got control over that your kid's coming back 2 hours late,
No,
but you've got control over how you respond
how you
to them
respond.
coming back two
Yeah.
hours late. Is that right?
Yeah. Working with NVR, the question is always, who can help me in this?
Yeah.
Who will
Yeah.
support me in this? You feel the more confidence. So you might phone the neighbour that you've got a relationship with down the road to say, can you just look out your window and see if my Tommy's there? That kind of thing. So it's collective.
Yeah. Yeah. And that parental presence, just talk about in the last few minutes, just talk about the parental presence, Penny, because I really like that. I think I like everything about NVR. That's what I keep saying. I really
It's
like
easy
that
to
bit.
like, isn't
Yeah.
it? I
But the
know.
parental presence is, I do struggle with NVR as well, as you know
Mm.
from our thing. There are bits where I think, oh, like the announcement, I find that quite hard. I can see the value in it, but I also find it quite hard. But so I think it's very, very interesting. But parental
Well, I think
presence.
that's why families and people who use NVR change it, and that's absolutely fine. It's no good having a manual where you have to follow the procedure. You've got to adapt it for your values, your parenting ethics, your child, your way of doing things. So yeah, it's all adaptable to your circumstances. But the parental presence for me is very much about how you were seen and how you occupied the space. And that's a lot of it's, do you remember the Looking Glass Self? I can't remember the name of the psychologist. Cooley, was it? That we are who is reflected back at us. So if you find yourself surrounded by people telling you that you're a bad parent, that you're inadequate, that you're useless, that you get it all wrong, look what you produced, you don't want to do that, what you want to do is this, then it's going to sink your presence. You're going to shrink. It's going to reduce it into erasure. If you can bring in those voices of reason that, okay, you're doing okay. You're a good person. Look, you've done this. Okay, you may have shouted a bit, and I know but we can do this. I'll help. You're worth helping. You matter. Then your presence starts to go up. And in your child's mind, that starts to change, because your child is seeing a community around you responding to you like you matter, like what you say is important, what you need is important, and they start to change how they see you. So we're talking about kind of internalized images of you changing in the child. And your systemic presence, how you are viewed in the community around the child, is there. So it's far more like it used to be. It's everybody knows my mum. I'm seen, and everybody's got her back. Everybody cares about me and cares about her care for me. I'm part of this village. It takes a village to raise a child, and I belong to that village, and my mum is valued. So is that your understanding of presence?
Yeah, and I was also thinking about how you can help your child know that you're present. So some of those can be that you actually are just present more.
Yeah.
That you actually just say, we're going to spend more time together, or I'm going to come and sit in your room and watch you. But there's also those indirect presence, isn't there? About, and this is not about buying them, but about leaving them their favourite biscuit or
The
writing on a little
relational
note.
gestures, the small acts of botheredness, the note in the lunchbox. When I'm talking about altering their expectations of you and their internalized version of you, confounding those expectations by doing differently. So you're no longer the dad who's grumpy in the morning and unavailable in the evening and only ever has complaints. Suddenly you're the dad who makes me feel nice and leaves a note in my lunchbox and brings me a hot chocolate at 6:30 when I'm playing on my iPad and says, you had a good day? I'm just gonna leave. It changes your kind of psychological presence in the child's mind. And when they're out and about and they're at school, and like I say, there's a note in the lunchbox, or a neighbour says, "Oh, how's your dad?" Your parent is always with you.
Yeah. And I wonder if for a teenager, if it's about checking in when they're out, doing a drive past where they are, or if they are stomped off in a strop and they've left the house. I guess it's knowing that you can't bring them back,
Yeah.
but you can have a parental presence by following behind them, or obviously we don't want to escalate it so they run off. So it's about, I guess
Mhm.
there's a balance to that, but you can still have those parental presence in some ways, even when your child is disconnecting from you.
Yeah, and those are the times when your parental presence needs to be raised physically and systemically in the community. It's when you find that distance is stretching, that's when the vigilant care comes in more, and you do. And just like you said, if a child is out and about and refusing to come home, you can't make them. And
Mhm.
yeah, the message is, I can't make you do anything, but I can do this. So I'm going to do this, and I'm doing it because you matter,
Mhm.
which is very different to, you're a bad person, I can't believe you're putting me through this, which just fractures and ruptures the relationship. So it's
Mhm.
working through that concern, through that connection, to gently change behaviours, hopefully, by changing your own.
And then you've got this support around you that's
Mm.
helping your emotional resilience to be able to do this bit with your child, isn't it? Because it's that thing about you can't pour from an empty jug. So
Yeah.
you need your supporters to be topping up your jug so
Hmm.
you can keep pouring it out into your little
Yeah.
person or your big person or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
And that's what we say. It takes a village to raise a child. What we tend to say is it takes a village to support a parent to raise a child. That's
Yeah.
how it works. NVR is very parent centred, child focused, parent centred. It's the parents who often get left behind
Mm.
and get blamed and criticised, but not supported. And then you end up with the child who's seeing this division. I'm supposed to do what my mum says, but everybody around her is telling us she's no good. So how am I supposed
Yeah.
to respect her when nobody else does? So we're parent centered. This person is worthy of respect, and they care about you. So it flows much better. There's a much better, easier logic.
Mm.
We all care. She cares. You matter.
Absolutely. And those are all relational based.
Yeah.
So I'm just aware we're running out of time, but tell me about NVR Northampton. So this is your company, tell us about it. What do you do? How do people
Ah.
access you?
We've got a website. It probably needs a bit of updating, but
Well,
yeah, you can find us online, nvrnorthampton.co.uk.
I'll put a link to it in the description of this podcast so people
Okay.
can just click. But
I'll
so
have to polish it very quickly then if people are going to be looking up now. So I set up NVR Northampton in 2016, I think. So I used to work for Relate as a counsellor there. And I had a EAP client who was suffering very
what's
bad.
EAP
It was
for?
employee assist programs. So Relate used to get the contracts for NHS staff or local authority staff. So we would be able to give them 6 sessions of counselling, and then if we begged, we may be able to give them a bit more if they needed it. But so a mother of many children who had recently lost the father in very tragic circumstances, and she was suffering incredible child-to-parent violence in the household. I'd never even heard of child-to-parent violence. So I've got 6 sessions, and all I can basically do, I think this was like 2012, 13 maybe, all I'd got was basically 6 sessions of hand patting, and they're theirs. And I didn't know, what are you going to do? And she'd gone to CAMS, and the family therapists there, when there were family therapists, threw their hands up and said, I don't know what to do with this. She basically ended up with a kind of bodyguard situation both ends of the day. Other than that, she lived in a household dominated by 2 violent sons and 2 littlies who she was trying to protect. So years later, when I did my systemic training and heard about NVR, it's one of those light bulbs. If I knew then what I knew now, I could have done so much to help. So seized upon it because it needed to happen, because it wasn't known about, and it was needed. It still is very much needed. So got in touch with Partnership Projects, Peter Jacobs' training then. He's now moved on to North America, and begged him for an hour to let me commission one of his trainers so that I could do my foundation level, the one that you've done, thinking it would be great. Loads of people who want to do this. Is brilliant. Made quite a big loss. Got me training and a few trained with me. Did it again and kind of built up. I've gone from foundation to advanced to trainer to supervisor to now we roll out our own training in 9 years. So now we get commissions from the local authority and child services or adoption support fund or schools or people who can and are able to will self-fund, and we run parenting groups or bespoke packages for people if that helps, to help them deal with mostly child-to-parent violence, anxiety-based problems with children, but most recently we're developing it for parental alienation, and we've been doing some court work, which has been an interesting experience. Yeah.
So people can come onto your website, whether they're parents, whether they're schools or social workers, and they can come on and get support from you if they need support for their family. But they can also come and do the training if they want to train an NVR, or if they want you to come and maybe talk more about this subject, because I think child-to-parent violence is it's quite a taboo subject. We've done a few bits on the podcast. I've recently talked to somebody from CAPA First Response, which is child against parent aggression, which is, and they offer support. It's different than NVR, but I don't think there's a lot of support out there. It's quite a closed door thing.
I mean, that was another thing that kind of spurred me on. I stumbled across Helen Bonnick's website, Holes in the Walls, where she was plotting on the map services for people dealing with child-to-parent violence, and there was just this vast desert from Northampton, but there was none. And these, lots of services will kind of set up, and then the funding goes, and so it needs to be embedded more. I'm really pleased now that the local authority, the health authority in Northampton, now does provide an NVR service to parents. So it is now worth people in our area to go into their GP and asking for it. So hopefully that will grow. But there's plenty of work to be done, and there's lots out there. And the more parents hear about this is a thing that happens a lot, you're not the only one, it's not your fault, there are things that you can do, the more will speak up.
Absolutely. I think that is the most important thing, is that for parents, for carers, for whoever it is, to know that they're not alone. There are support like NVR Northampton or whatever, and it's not because you're a bad person. This is something that's going on within your family that you really can access support for, and you really need support. So thank you so much for your time, Penny, and I'm sure we'll want to catch up with you again in the future.
I'd love to.
Thanks for being on Pondering Play and Therapy.
Thank you.